A new study finds that boys who play aggressive sports, listen to this, they may not be leaving that aggression just on the field.
Researchers found that the likelihood of a teenage boy abusing his girlfriend is about twice as high if he plays football or basketball. The study followed 1,600 boys in relationships and found that those who played the two sports were more likely to have abused their partners physically, sexually, or psychologically than the boys who didn't play sports. The abuse rate was also much higher among football and basketball players compared to other sports like wrestling, tennis, or swimming. Joining us this morning to talk about it is licensed mental health counselor Jim West, president of Total Life Counseling. Jim, did it surprise you when you saw these numbers that it's that much higher among boys in, I guess you could call them aggressive sports?
It's not surprising. You know, probably the biggest example of this is the Super Bowl, where the whole family, boys and girls, sons and daughters and parents are sitting watching the Super Bowl and watching the glorification of huge guys pummeling each other and being rewarded by the fans, and really pretty women dancing up and down, cheerleaders, and and rewarding them for violent behavior.
Now, the one thing that popped out to me on this is, though, is it a problem with the sport or with the people who play the sport? I mean, if you have an aggressive person, maybe they automatically gravitate towards the sport, or is it the sport making them more aggressive?
You watch the Talladega Nights movie, and one of the big lines in that movie is, if you're not first, you're last. And I think a lot of times in the American culture, what we're hearing in football, basketball, and a lot of sports, but mainly football especially, they're hearing, win at all cost, knock them down, pummel them. They're coming back into the sidelines and being high-fived and rewarded for a guy being dragged off the field. And so then it's really hard when they're getting all this attention. It's really hard for them to separate that and not let that spill over into their home life.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, how do you convince your teens that, okay, it's fine to be aggressive on the field because that's what it requires, but you got to leave the aggression on the field because their minds may not be ready to turn it off like that.
Boys under the age of 18 have the highest, they drink more alcohol than anyone. They're trying to deal with the ones that are not winning on the field, who are being told that they're losers, that they've got to really get back in the game, and if they're not cutting it, there's this high performance anxiety, and they come into my office all the time, and I talk about the winningest coach of all time, which is Coach John Wooden. He had 7 national championships in a row, 10 national championships in 12 years, but never talked about winning, never talked about the pummeling people or being the best. He said, be your personal best. Be your personal best. Do the best that you possibly can, and if you win, great. If you don't, hey, let the cards fall as they may.
Jim, I think one thing that bothers me is when you read the blogs on this is people keep saying, oh, it's getting worse as we go on. I have the feeling it was always like this. They just didn't study it back then because, you think back when we were kids, the same numbers you're citing right now were probably true back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s then too.
I think you're right. I think it's always been there, but I think that feminine rights and more attention to domestic violence, and I mean, now there's laws that if a woman is battered and she presses charges and then drops the charges, it doesn't matter. The state picks it up anyway. They're going to protect that woman because she's being, intimidated behind the scenes. And so it's now that we have more rights and we're drawing more attention to it, I think that it's been really interesting. There's a group called Coaching Boys to Be Men, and it's a group called Futures Against Violence. Training students over the course of a year. They're teaching coaches. They're giving the tools to coaches to teach them about what it is to be a man and how to take, the aggression out on the field and not take it out against their partners.
All right, Jim West, always good to see you. Appreciate your expertise.
Good to be here.
Morning.
Thanks,
Amy?
John.